Hello, this is Erica with Launching Legacies. Welcome to our daily devotional. Today we are continuing our extended applications of biblical stories, and we're going to talk about a stand-up guy today, right? This guy you probably have heard of, or at least the story, and he comes from the book of Ruth. And so we're looking at Ruth. We're actually going to peruse through the entire book, or a good portion of the book. So various chapters in the book of Ruth, and we're going to talk about Boaz. Okay, so here goes the thing about Boaz. The book is called the book of Ruth. Okay, so Ruth gets a lot of the focus in this book for what she does, but today's application is going to look at how Boaz has a noble character. And so we're going to follow Boaz through the story instead of Ruth. So we got to give you a little backstory that Ruth is widowed, her mother's in-law is widowed, and they come to her mother-in-law's land, and she needs to make money. So she goes out and she kind of collects the what's left over from the people that are harvesting the in the fields. So she ends up in Boaz's field at some point. And when Boaz sees her gleaming, picking up whatever's left after the harvest, he starts being stand up right there. He starts by telling his people, he goes over and he tells his people that they need to leave extra for her while she's gleaming. Okay, so she's gonna come behind the people who are harvesting. And of course, if you think about a person who owns land or a farmer or whatever, you want to get all of the wheat, you want to get everything you can, right? Because that all represents money. So you wouldn't ever tell your workers, well, don't get everything, leave something for these people who I'm not benefiting from. So first he's very sacrificial, because he's like, look, leave extra for her. She's gonna come behind you, and I want you to make sure she's safe and leave extra for her. So he starts by just recognizing her. He doesn't really have a lot of interactions, just like, okay, leave extra for her, all right, and make sure that she has something to pick up when she's going through the fields. So he does that, and then after he does that, she notices that, okay, he's being really kind to me, and he keeps giving me stuff, right? And so let's see where we are at. So we're in the 3rd chapter now of Ruth. And so we're in the 2nd chapter of Ruth. So now Boaz went over to Ruth and said, listen, my daughter, stay right here with us. And when you gather grain, don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young women working in the fields. Okay, so now that he's told the workers to leave extra, but then he tells Ruth, I want you to stay gleaning in my field, because if you're in my fields, they're going to keep you safe, because this is evidently not a safe thing. Women weren't really protected. And so she's wandering around kind of like a little scavenger. And so Boaz, he leaves extra for her, and then he wants her to be protected. And so he tells Ruth, make sure that when you're coming in the fields, to come to my field and stay in my fields. Okay, so Ruth goes back and tells her mother-in-law, you know what, Boaz, he's been very kind to me. He's treated me with kindness. And Boaz recognizes, of course, who she is and what's going on. All right, so when we move a little bit further down, after Naomi and Ruth both realize that Boaz is being kind, Naomi, which is the mother-in-law, tells Ruth, you know what, it's a good idea for you to keep gathering in his fields, but then she sends him to take a bath, get ready, put on perfume, and go and sit at the feet Boaz while he's in the threshing floor. All right, so basically she wants her to present herself to Boaz as that she's ready, or wants to be married, or wants to be picked up and taken care of by him. Basically, it's an interesting tradition, but and in some ways it may have different connotations, but in this connotation, she's trying to get Boaz to recognize that Ruth is not just gleaming in the fields. Ruth wants to be married, she wants to be taken care of, and so on and so forth. So Ruth does what her mother-in-law says. And so when she does what her mother-in-law says, she goes and she lays at Boaz's feet. And she goes and lays by a pile of grain where he's at the threshing floor. And around midnight, it says that Boaz suddenly woke up and turned over, and he was surprised that there was a woman laying at his feet. Okay. And he said, he says to her, "The Lord will bless you, daughter," exclaimed Boaz. "You are showing even more family loyalty now than when you did before. Before you had gone after, you could have gone after the younger men, whether that they were rich or poor, right? Because these were young men. So now we know Boaz is older, okay, which is part of why he's wiser, also part of why he owns so many fields. But his kindness towards Ruth is this. He's like, oh, he recognizes that she's got integrity. He recognizes that she is demonstrating family loyalty. So one, he leaves extra for her in the fields, and then he protects her by making sure that the people of his field are taking care of her. And he tells her, look, it will always be protecting you. We keep an eye out for you. So just stay where we are, and you'll always be fine. Then when Ruth goes to Boaz, he recognizes that she's being loyal. He doesn't treat her like a prostitute, because in this context, it could have been as such, right? But he doesn't treat her inappropriately. He's kind to her, he's generous with her, and he extends really like the right hand. He covers her up with the cloak, and then he sends her away with grains and things from this threshing floor. So he sends her away with goods, and then he says, I got to take care of some business. All right, so the business he needs to take care of in order to truly properly marry Ruth, and for this to go on the right way, he needs to go talk to the next in line to be able to marry Ruth according to their traditions. And so he sets up this big thing, finds the next person in line, has a whole town hall meeting, and then he is able to get permission to marry Ruth because he follows this strategic order. And here goes the thing. This is why we call Boaz a stand-up guy, because he doesn't force himself or press the issue in any of these directions. He doesn't exploit Ruth. He doesn't take advantage of her. Instead, he shows her genuine kindness. And when it's an opportunity for him to win, he doesn't take the opportunity to win. Instead, he yields that opportunity to Ruth because of his interest in her, but his interest in caring for her. And so we look at Boaz, and oftentimes we look at the story and we're like, Ruth found her Boaz, Ruth found her Boaz. But what is a Boaz? Like, what is he representing? For one, he's a kinsman redeemer. That's the term that they use in the book of Ruth, is that he's a kinsman redeemer. He's the closest kin that could marry Ruth and bring her back into a level of status, and therefore also Naomi back into a level of status by buying their land and allowing them to actually inherit what a woman would not be able to inherit had they not been married. And so he redeems the situation for both Ruth and Naomi, and that's why he's called the kinsman redeemer. But what is that action doing? What it's doing is he's standing up for the integrity of who these women are. It doesn't really say that Ruth was extremely beautiful. None of that. That's not a part of this equation. It's not like he's an old guy looking for this hot young thing. Well, we really don't know if she's a hot young thing because that's not a part of the equation. We know, though, that he takes an interest in protecting her and caring for her before he takes an interest in getting something from her. And it's important that we remember that oftentimes when we think about the application of this story, this kinsman redeemer is taking the opportunity. I'm sure he could marry any young woman he wanted to marry, right? If it was about being married to a hot young thing, or a PYT, a pretty young thing, he could marry any pretty young thing that was available. But that's not the action that he's taking here. Instead of benefiting himself, he ends up protecting and caring for this woman who he really doesn't know. I mean, they're relatives, but Naomi is related to more than just Boaz in this city. And Boaz is the one that shows this extended kindness. And so he decides to sacrifice for himself or for his company, which is the fields, right? And he puts himself out there, goes and does this whole town hall meeting to see who can redeem Ruth and who's wanting to, and tell him that he wants to, and give him a sandal and all that kind of stuff. You have to read the book of Ruth to kind of get the details of the story. But he does all this because he's truly interested and engaged in making sure that her well-being is taken care of. And the application for us is this. Are we going out of our way to make sure that others are taken care of? Is it something that we are thinking of? Yeah, he ends up marrying Ruth, and maybe some people think that that's a benefit, but he doesn't pursue Ruth in that direction. He takes care of her and protects her before he has any interest, or she displays any interest in wanting to marry. And so he goes out of his way to be kind towards Ruth and to demonstrate generosity towards her. How generous are we in our thinking and our behaviors and our directions towards others? Do we sacrifice? Are we willing to lose so other people can win when someone's in a position that could be considered exploitive, right? Because she's laying at his feet. This is a time where she could be exploited. Do we cover them up and send them off with good things, or do we let them remain uncovered and bare and hope things happen right for them? How is our mindset? Are we like Boaz's? Are we like the kinsman redeemer, doing all that we can to make sure that this person is being treated well? Well, you know that God's character is that he would want us to be like this kinsman redeemer. He would want us to go out of our way to make sure things were well. And we have to remember that. We have to remember when we apply this story of Ruth and Boaz, or particularly Boaz's character, the reason he's a quote unquote stand-up guy is because he does go out of his way. He's a good guy, and he wants to do good by way of Ruth and Naomi. And we have the opportunity to be good by way of somebody too. Right? Most days we have an opportunity to cover a person up and be gracious to them, protect them, or leave a little extra for them, or to disregard them and take care of the business that we've been taking care of the whole time. And so we need to be mindful just to think about what we choose to do when it comes to our graciousness or redemption, sort of say, of others. I'm praying for you. I hope that you're praying for Launching Legacies. I'd love for you to read the book of Ruth. It's a very short book, but I know that you would enjoy it. And we will be following up with another of our applicational devotionals tomorrow. So until then, please be blessed. And remember, keep praying, keep reading, keep studying. The word will definitely change your life.